Good evening, and thank you for joining us for our Second Chances annual gala. My name is Jose Bo, and I'm a current PLS board member and a current Family and Community Engagement Director at the public school system. I'm also a former criminal justice professor. As a former criminal justice professor, I often taught my students who would be future practitioners of criminal justice to teach those in their care with dignity, justice, and equity. As a formerly incarcerated individual, I got to see PLS do its work behind walls towards these ends in service of their clients. As a country, we hope to begin turning the page on things like racism, inequity, and injustice. And PLS has always been on this page, from calling to the end of solitary confinement to championing the end of shackling women giving birth, to leading the race and equity work and eradicating racism wherever it lies in the criminal justice system. The Prison Legal Services has always been on the right side of justice. As Kamala Harris said a couple of nights ago, quoting the late Senator John Lewis, democracy is not a state, it is an act. I hope you enjoy the rest of this program and the rest of the night, and I urge you to join me in doing our part to reaching into our souls and wallets to help continue this great work on behalf of our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. I'm Patty Guerin. I'm the chair of the Prison Legal Services Board of Directors, and I've been a supporter and board member of PLS for the past 20 years. Thank you for being here tonight. PLS needs your support. We need your support so badly right now. Not only is PLS dealing with all of the things they always deal with, the brutality, the lack of medical care, the lack of mental health care, the conditions, the brutality, the horrors of being in prison. But now everything is made worse and more deadly by the presence of COVID. COVID is ravaging our prisons. In a few minutes, Liz Matos is going to come and talk to you about what PLS is doing right now, what they are working on, and why we need your support more than ever. I just want to take a moment to thank PLS and its staff for everything they've been doing. They have been under tremendous pressure and working incredibly hard for the past year, always, but for the last 6 months because of COVID, most especially. And I thank them all for everything they've been doing. Before Liz Matos speaks, you're going to have the absolute pleasure of hearing from a man named Jamian Gray. Jamian is going to read to you a poem written by an incarcerated person named Miguel V. Jamian has more to tell you than reading a poem because Jamian himself was in prison for 17 years. He grew up in Washington, D.C. in the midst of the crack epidemic, and at age 20, he went to prison. He lived the next 17 years of his life in prison, and now he's a free man. And since he got out of prison, he has been using his time to try to help others. He's doing it by using words, teaching, writing, reading, transforming people's minds about the criminal legal system by way of the spoken word. He works at a place called Free Minds Book Club and Writing Workshop in Washington. And for his work there, he has been given a very prestigious fellowship, the John Lewis Fellowship, for his work there. He continues to work there to try to transform people's minds and thoughts about the criminal legal system and to help people learn how to help themselves. He's quite a transformative force in our world. He has a wonderful presence and a strong message to send to you. I welcome him here. Thank you.
It's an honor and a pleasure to participate in this event to support prisoners' legal services. My name is Jamie Gray, the John Lewis Fellow and Poet Ambassador. I will be reading a poem by Miguel V., who is currently in the struggle behind the wall, titled Lady Liberty. Lady Liberty must be asleep, or maybe she turned her back. Lady Liberty must be asleep, or maybe she doesn't care. Lady Liberty must be asleep, or maybe she's in on it too. Lady Liberty must be asleep because there's millions of people in the cage. Lady Liberty must be asleep because innocents are dying every day. Lady Liberty must be asleep because those guilty remain free. Lady Liberty must be asleep. Or maybe she's racist too. Lady Liberty must be asleep. Or maybe she just can't see. Lady Liberty must be asleep. Or maybe she's just a disguise. Lady Liberty must be asleep because we're still waiting on justice. Lady Liberty must be asleep because we're focused on the wrong things. Lady Liberty must be asleep because no one follows her values. Lady Liberty must be asleep. Lady Liberty must be asleep. This poem was dedicated to Trayvon, Tamar, Michael, Eric, Brianna, etc. The list is long. Now Ahmad and George. May you rest in peace with Lady Liberty.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this year for another special night. I'm sorry it has to be remotely and we can't all be together. But 2020 has certainly been a year that we will never forget. From COVID to the heightened calls against racism and police brutality to the seemingly never-ending election. For many of those incarcerated in Massachusetts, 2020 began with systemic brutality at Susan Baranowski Prison in Shirley, Massachusetts. It all began on January 10th in an incident between some correctional officers and a number of prisoners. The incarcerated individuals were moved to other prisons immediately. And despite that, dozens of people incarcerated there were systemically brutalized in the weeks following. They were bitten by dogs, beaten, shot with pepper guns, and had their hair pulled or cut, and were called racial slurs. Our office had to shift gears completely, and literally everyone in the office worked to collect information, visit clients, photograph injuries, and take calls from distraught family members. We were just beginning to sort through the sea of information when coronavirus hit our prisons and jails. Soon we would have major outbreaks across the DOC and in a number of county jails, and at least 11 people would eventually succumb to COVID in prisons and jails across the Commonwealth. We say at least because the numbers of deaths for this time period this year are far higher than in previous years, so the number is likely much higher. A number of organizations and PLS filed lawsuits to bring relief for those incarcerated. CPCS and the ACLU worked hard to achieve some releases, and they did for the pretrial population. We're very thankful for their work. PLS filed a lawsuit because releases did not happen in the Department of Correction, where many of the prisons are very overcrowded. That case, Foster v. Meacham, is still active today, and we have an emergency motion that should be heard the coming week. But in this case, earlier this year, the SJC very clearly urged the DOC to release people and to prevent another outbreak from happening. But that has not happened. Right now, there are over 170 positive cases at MCI Norfolk alone. There's an outbreak at Concord Prison. There's an outbreak at Shirley Minimum. MASAC, which is the prison that holds civilly committed people for substance use who shouldn't be there to begin with had a third of its population infected last month. Only 4 patients are there now, and still they have infections. The counties have similarly been ravaged by COVID. Essex County has had over 150 people test positive since October 1st, in addition to 30 staff members. And other counties are showing positives as well. Staff and correctional officers have self-reported. And at South Bay, 7 people reported being positive in just 1 week, but yet no regular testing for incarcerated individuals there or across the system, so we have no way of knowing how many people are actually infected. As we all well know, this pandemic is far from over. We have every reason to believe that this second wave of COVID will be far more devastating than the first. And that is why last week, New Jersey released over 2,500 people in just 1 day who were due to be released in the next year anyway. And that's in addition to 1,000 people that had released earlier during the pandemic. And California released over 8,000 people. In the Commonwealth, we've had major outbreaks, multiple major outbreaks in the last 2 months, and yet 0 efforts to decarcerate. After 8 long months of enduring pandemic conditions, including solitary confinement, our clients who are literally in the care and custody of the Commonwealth have been denied the most basic and essential tool to preventing the contraction and the spread of COVID, social distancing. Prisons and jails are commonly called petri dishes because once the virus gets in, it spreads very quickly. This is an issue that demands far more attention than it's getting. And I have to thank Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, DA Rollins, Carlene Pablos from the Massachusetts Public Health Association, Monique Jimenez, an epidemiologist from Harvard and Brigham and Women's, who came together this week, along with Senator Roush, who went to Norfolk to visit her constituents there earlier this week, to call for decarceration and to call for more urgent action. But shockingly, in response to this press conference, the governor actually stated that the DOC was doing a great job. What we're experiencing right now is a total and systemic failure to act on the part of the governor, our public health and public safety officials, the Department of Corrections. They've all demonstrated a blatant disregard for basic human rights for people behind the wall. And their message has been heard that these lives, predominantly Black and brown lives, just don't matter. The thousands of people incarcerated have heard that message, and the tens of thousands of family members who love them have heard it as well. And make no mistake, if this were a nursing home or a school, there would be public outrage. Advocating in this space is grueling work. Trying to sensitize people to the plight of incarcerated people just makes it all the more clear how deeply ingrained systemic racism is in our collective psyche. If we truly believed that all people were equally deserving of love, care, and the resources they need to succeed, we would not be treating people this way. Society would likely be organized very differently. And indeed, we likely would not have prisons or jails at all. Black and brown people are not just funneled into the criminal legal system unfairly and disproportionately. Once imprisoned, behind the wall, systemic racism continues. Racial injustice continues in so many forms. Through discipline, classification, job assignments, access to healthcare and mental health care, access to programming, freedom from being brutalized, access to basic nutrition so that people don't age faster than they need to or have immunities to stay healthy, and access to basic family contact. All of these inequities contribute to Black and brown people being disadvantaged in reentry and having higher recidivism rates. This is deepening the cyclical harm to those communities. But I remain hopeful, especially because of the work that PLS is undergoing right now, internally and externally, following the leadership of our attorneys of color, LaToya Whiteside, Kristen Henry, and Mario Paredes, who I hired in the last 2 years, PLS is launching a racial equity in corrections initiative to focus on these inequities, to expose them, and to work towards reducing the harm done to Black and Brown communities. We will do this by centering the voices of our clients, their family members, and the organizations we partner with on the ground so that we can collectively achieve the change we so desperately need. Despite everything, we are motivated to be bolder and to be better and to do it in solidarity with those behind the wall who we love and support. I hope you are inspired tonight by the words of our clients, their family members, by our wonderful sage, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, and by the many others who understand that centering this work is so important, especially now. Thank you all so much, and look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Thank you.
I truly believe that it is critical to support PLS in their continued efforts to end long-term segregation, solitary confinement through legislation and litigation, and I appreciate their continued work and tireless effort in doing so.
On October 29th, 2019, almost a year ago, our family received the devastating and heart-wrenching news that our beloved brother had committed suicide at MCI Shirley. We felt then, and still feel now, that his death was totally provoked and completely preventable. I can honestly say that if not for the dedication and unwavering support of PLS and Jesse White in particular, we would have been lost. And for that we are and will always be grateful. Thank you, PLS, and thank you, Jesse White.
Hello, my name is Neary Patterson, and it is important for PLS to do race-based work because Black and Brown people are disproportionately impacted by incarceration every day. This means that our families live through the trauma that comes with having a loved one incarcerated more than anyone else. Our families and our loved ones matter, and our voices need a chance to be heard. The Racial Equity in Corrections Initiative will provide the necessary platform for our people to be heard, supported, and most importantly, it will help keep us from being victims to a system that already intentionally targets us.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is LaToya Whiteside, and I'm a staff attorney at Prisoner Legal Services. This evening, it is my great honor and privilege to introduce to you one of my own personal heroes, as well as tonight's keynote speaker, the Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. She's an advocate, she's an activist, she's a policymaker, she's a survivor, and she's a history maker. Not only is she the first woman of color to be elected to Congress in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, she's also the first woman of color to serve on Boston's City Council in its 100-year history. Throughout her tenures as a public servant, she has fought tirelessly to ensure that those who are most impacted, those who suffer the most pain, are the closest to the power. She, during her first term as Congresswoman, fought tirelessly and was a champion of justice. She fought to ensure and support fair compensation for low-wage workers. She also fought for immigration reform and to support survivors of sexual violence. And she has fought to fundamentally re-image our criminal legal system. The Congresswoman currently serves on two powerful congressional committees, the House Committee on Oversight and Reform and the House Committee on Financial Services, both of which have remained focused on legislatively addressing issues such as care, concern, and consequence to the American people. In 2016, she was one of New York Times' Young Democrats to Watch, and in 2018, she was named as the Boston Globe's Bostonians of the Year. In 2020, I am sure that she will continue to make history. Everyone would please do me the honor and give a virtual round of applause for my Congresswoman and yours, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. Thank you so much for being here, Congresswoman.
Hello, everyone, and thank you to PLS for extending the invitation for me to join you for a few minutes virtually for such an important convening. I wish times were different and we could all be together. I miss you, but I do appreciate the opportunity to join you virtually so that I can celebrate and thank you. I'm grateful for the dedicated PLS staff, board members, and volunteers. The work that you make possible every single day is nothing short of amazing. And especially in the midst of a global pandemic where everything is just that much harder. And the impacted families that you serve are just experiencing unprecedented destabilization and trauma. I'm grateful for the leadership of Liz Matos and her colleagues at PLS. Thank you for your work in ensuring that the needs of our incarcerated neighbors remain front and center, and that this work is informed and our advocacy directly by them. The work that we have to do is to reimagine and to reconstruct this unjust criminal legal system. It requires political courage and will, and that's really it. And it's time that we get it done. Now, while I'm new to Congress, I'm not new to policy or the work of movement building or dismantling oppressive systems. The people of the Massachusetts 7th Congressional District sent me to Washington to make sure that we continue to elevate these issues impacting our most vulnerable and those that are historically disenfranchised, ignored, left out, and left behind. The Massachusetts 7th is one of the most unequal districts in our country. You can learn everything you need to know by a mere 3-mile bus ride on the number 1 bus from Cambridge to Roxbury. Within a matter of blocks, life expectancy drops by decades and median household income by the tens of thousands. Unfortunately, most of the families that you serve, those that have been impacted, who have loved ones that are incarcerated, they come from these communities that are experiencing the greatest inequities and disparities. You see that stark contrast in their daily lives, and certainly in our criminal legal system, and how it treats men and women from our communities. As someone whose father cycled in and out of the criminal legal system for most of my childhood, I know firsthand and continue to witness the disparate impact of our legal system on low income and communities of color. What would it look like for returning citizens if we provided them with adequate health care and mental health services before sending them home? Job training that's relevant, secure housing when they come out. What would it look like? Right now in our Commonwealth, 2 20-minute phone calls each week from behind the wall can add up to nearly $2,000 a year in some counties. The financial burden that this creates for families is unconscionable, and it certainly makes it harder for there to be successful family reunification, which is critical to successful reentry and to combating recidivism. Look, Massachusetts has been a leader on many things, from marriage equality to healthcare reform, and we should be leading on this front as well. We should be pace setters, moving with urgency, critical thoughtfulness, being led by those closest to the issues and most impacted. Now, look, even before this pandemic hit, we already saw the devastation that incarceration was having in our communities and on our families. And the pandemic has made everything worse. We need to decarcerate now. This is separating families, and certainly with this pandemic raging and not under control, our loved ones behind the wall are vulnerable. Our prisons aren't set up to be hospitals. These are environments where a virus like this thrives. Every day, I grow more alarmed by the numbers that we've been made aware of in terms of who has tested positive. So we need to decarcerate now, and that's why I introduced the People's Justice Guarantee, so that we can radically reimagine our criminal legal system to center the humanity and the dignity of all. It's why I continue to hold hearings centering the voices of those most impacted. It's why I stay acutely uncomfortable in proximity to the hurt and the pain, so that I never grow complacent in this work, but that I remain vigilant. Because our families matter. Their preservation, their health matters. Their lives matter. So Liz, thank you. Thank you to the entire PLS family for everything that you do. Thank you for being my partners in this work. Thank you for being my teachers in this work. And thank you to everyone who is invested in this organization for your steadfast support for those behind the wall and their impacted families. You know, Angela Davis reminds us that there are people who think that social problems go to jail, but it's people who love and are loved, who come from families and communities. And so our families are doing that time right alongside their loved one. So thank you for keeping those families close to your heart, for centering them, for elevating their voices, for keeping up the good fight. I'm proud to be doing this work right alongside you, and I can't wait until we're back in community once again.
I'm honored to join Prisoners Legal Services in our ongoing work, removing barriers to phone calls and visits that keep Massachusetts families apart from their incarcerated loved ones, and dismantling the many forms of systemic racism that are embedded within our criminal legal system. Thank you, PLS, for your dedication to improving the lives of incarcerated people across this Commonwealth, and for your tenacious advocacy on behalf of a more just Massachusetts.
Hi, I'm State Senator Jamie Eldridge, serving as the Senate Chair of the Criminal Justice Reform Caucus, as well as the Judiciary Committee. And I just want to give a big shout out to Prisoners Legal Services. I work with them on a weekly basis, everything from improving conditions for prisoners to passing the no-cost calls bill to reforming solitary confinement. The work that I do and so many of my colleagues do would not be possible if not for the advocacy by Prisoners Legal Services. So please donate towards this gala, help financially support PLS. I'm deeply grateful for the work. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for joining me and my colleagues this evening to show our deep appreciation for the work that PLS does with us together to end the practice of solitary confinement, predatory practices like prison phone calls, and to dismantle this entire unjust and racist criminal legal system, particularly here in Massachusetts. As the only legislator with a sibling behind the wall currently, I know how important their work and our work is together today, tomorrow, and the days ahead.
Applaud Prisoners Legal Services and its ongoing commitment to advocating on behalf of incarcerated persons in Massachusetts. Through its advocacy, Prisoners Legal Services amplifies the voice of some of our most marginalized and underserved populations. I look forward to our continued collaboration on legislative matters, such as ending solitary confinement and the high cost of prison calls. Together, we will continue to fight for a more equitable and humane criminal justice system. Thank you.
I just want to say how grateful I am to Prison Legal Services. They do very, very difficult work for people who have nowhere else to turn. We need Prison Legal Services, and I'm so grateful for the work they do.
Good evening. My name is Jim Rollins. I'm Vice Chair of the Board of PLS and a partner at Nelson Mullins, Riley and Scarborough in Boston. On behalf of all of our colleagues at PLS, thank you for joining us this evening. Special thanks to our participants, Representative Pressley for her inspiring remarks, our other legislators for their comments, and PLS's former clients and their families for sharing their stories. And of course, PLS's staff for their unwavering commitment. They make us proud every day. Also, thank you to all of our individual ticket purchasers for this evening. Thank you. And especially to our sponsors for this evening. Our sponsors include Goodwin Proctor, Meehan Boyle, Black and Bogdanow, Josh Doan and Patty Guerin, Morgan Lewis, Todd and Weld, Kuna and Holcomb, the law offices of Howard Friedman, Al Caneb, Libby Hoops Brooks, Nelson Mullins, William C. Newman, Ken Parsegian, the law offices of Rosemary Scapiccio, J.W. Carney and Associates. We appreciate your support this evening, and we look forward to the continued financial support of all of you in the future. With that, I bid you a good night. We look forward to seeing you, hopefully in person, sometime soon. Thank you.